My name is Celeste Marlowe, 28 years old. The day I got into Yale should have been the brightest memory of my youth, but in my family, victories never belonged to me for long. I can still see the ivory envelope trembling in my hands, my heart pounding so hard that the words blurred. A full ride, tuition, housing, books, even a campus job already arranged. It was the culmination of every late-night study session, every debate meet, every lonely lunch hour with a calculus textbook instead of friends. I ran down the stairs, barefoot, hair still damp from a rushed shower. My mom was stirring a pot of stew in the kitchen, steam rising in ribbons that fogged the window. "Mom," I gasped, holding out the letter like it was a newborn. I got in, full scholarship. Her eyes flicked over the page, a polite smile tightening around her mouth. "That's something," she said, ladling broth like she hadn't heard the words that should have changed our lives. "We'll talk when your dad gets home." That was the first crack. Not celebration, not tears of pride, just delay. I told myself she was overwhelmed, that Dad would light up when he heard. But deep down, a shadow of dread settled. By then I'd learned my place in the Marlowe family. My brother Adrian, 3 years older, perpetually coasting, was the son, and I was expected to orbit. He played video games until dawn, failed classes, scraped by with excuses, yet every misstep was forgiven, explained away. Boys mature later. He just needs to find his passion. My father poured money into tutors, consultants, essay coaches. I had asked once about SAT prep courses, and Dad had barked, "You're smart enough, figure it out yourself." So I did, alone. I tried not to resent it, but when the rejection letters piled up on the counter, thick, impersonal envelopes addressed to Adrian, it was like watching a storm cloud grow in the living room. The tension pressed against me like humidity. A week before I was supposed to leave for New Haven, Mom announced we were having a special family dinner. Pot roast, Dad's favorite. Adrian slouched into his chair, smirk barely hidden, as though he already knew the script. Dad poured wine, cleared his throat, and smiled a smile that felt rehearsed. "Celeste," he said, "you've always been resourceful, strong. We're proud, but family means sacrifice. Sometimes we must give so another can rise." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" He set his fork down, fingers pressing into the table. "You'll decline Yale. Adrian needs us now. He needs every resource. You can start at community college, transfer later." I laughed, high-pitched, brittle. "You're joking." Mom's hand fluttered to her necklace. "Sweetheart, a girl doesn't need a prestigious degree. You'll do fine anywhere. Adrian, he needs this chance. Without it, he'll be lost." The words sliced me open. "I worked for this, alone. You can't just—" Dad's face hardened. "Watch your tone. We know what's best for this family." "What's best for this family, or what's best for Adrian?" "Don't be selfish," Mom snapped. "He's your brother." I looked at Adrian. He wasn't pleading or ashamed. He was grinning, satisfied, like the verdict had already been written. Something inside me snapped. "You want me to throw away everything for him? He had tutors, consultants, your money. I had nothing but grit, and I won. And now you want me to lose so he can keep failing?" The air thickened, stew cooling on plates no one touched. Dad shoved back his chair. "Decline by Monday or pack your bags." I excused myself, voice shaking, and climbed to my room. I cried until my throat burned, until the pillow was soaked. At midnight, I called the only person who had ever chosen me without conditions, my grandmother, Ruth. Her voice came clear, steady, the way she always sounded. I choked through the story, every cruel word, every dismissal. Silence stretched on the line, then she said 5 words, "Pack your things, come here." I don't think I slept at all that night. When the house finally stilled, I stuffed my life into garbage bags, clothes, laptop, files. As I lifted one bag, I noticed a thick envelope on Dad's desk, Parent Plus loan application. The words didn't mean much to me then, but the sight sent a chill down my spine, like it was evidence of a crime not yet committed. I tiptoed past Adrian's room. He was snoring, a video game console still glowing. Down the stairs, through the living room. The family photo on the mantel seemed to watch me go, 4 smiles frozen, already a lie. When I stepped into the night, shoes in hand, the air smelled of lilacs and asphalt. My old Honda Civic coughed to life, headlights slicing the dark. The house behind me loomed like a stranger's. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Grandma Ruth was waiting on her porch, coffee steaming in her hand, though dawn had barely touched the horizon. She didn't ask for explanations. She just hugged me, long and firm, and whispered, "You're safe now." I wanted to believe her, but as the horizon lightened, a thought gnawed at me. What kind of family asked their daughter to bury her future alive? And if they could do this once, what wouldn't they do? The first semester at community college felt like a punishment handed down by fate, even though I knew the truth. It was survival. I rented a tiny studio near campus, the kind of place where you could touch the stove from the bed, the wallpaper peeled in curling strips, and the radiator hissed like a snake every night. Grandma Ruth had covered the deposit and the first month's rent, pressing the keys into my palm as if she were entrusting me with a secret treasure. By day, I sat in fluorescent classrooms, scribbling notes until my wrist cramped. By afternoon, I tutored other students in math, my patience stretched thin by kids who only showed up because their parents had paid. At night, I tied on a stiff apron and poured coffee at a diner until 2 a.m, refilling mugs for truckers and insomniacs. My diet narrowed to diner leftovers, instant ramen, and dollar store bread. 4 hours of sleep became luxury. But I kept my grades perfect. I had to. Each A wasn't just a letter, it was proof that my parents hadn't broken me. The phone rang during those first months, Mom's voice in voicemails dripping with reproach. "Celeste, stop being dramatic. Come home. Apologize. Let's put this behind us." Dad's voice was harder. "You think you can survive without us? You'll come crawling back." I deleted every message. Adrian texted once. "Traitor." I blocked him. Grandma Ruth became my family. Every Sunday she'd call me to dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. She always packed me home with containers, enough food to stretch through the week. She slipped $20 bills into my textbooks, pretended not to hear when I protested. When my civic broke down, she wrote the check without hesitation. "Family takes care of each other," she said, her eyes daring me to argue. Meanwhile, Adrian's life played like a parody of privilege. My parents had somehow muscled him into a private college in Pennsylvania. Not prestigious, but costly. They refinanced the house, dipped into their retirement, and signed loans they barely understood. Adrian lasted 2 years. Probation became dismissal. A vandalism scandal, whispered about, but hushed in official reports, pushed him out for good. Grandma clucked her tongue when she heard. "They'll just throw more money after him," she said. She was right. He bounced to a college in Florida, lasted 1 semester, then quit. Back home, he disappeared into online poker and video games, the glow of screens replacing ambition. I, on the other hand, transferred to Ohio State. Partial scholarship. I moved into a cramped apartment with 2 other students, stacked shifts at the library, and a restaurant hostess job on weekends. The exhaustion felt familiar, but at least I was moving forward. One night, walking home after closing, I overheard 2 teaching assistants joking about a case file on Adrian's fraternity vandalism. "His name should have been on it," one said. But somebody's dad had connections. They laughed, turned the corner, never saw me standing frozen. A truth clicked into place. My parents weren't just enabling him. They were cleaning his messes, rewriting reality to shield him. The anger kept me awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment. They had denied me Yale because of family responsibility, yet they bent laws, debts, and reputations to save Adrian. That imbalance lodged in my chest like a stone. But there were flickers of grace. A professor, after I aced a brutal finance exam, wrote on my paper, "You are unyielding, remember that." The word echoed in me. It felt like a seed, waiting for the right soil to grow. Through all of it, Grandma remained steady. Her antique shop smelled of polished wood and lavender sachets. Sometimes I'd sit in the back room, surrounded by porcelain figurines and old clocks, while she balanced ledgers in her precise handwriting. "Value," she said once, holding up a cracked vase. "It's not always about perfection, it's about resilience. What's survived tells a story." I tucked those words away without knowing how much I'd need them later. After graduating from Ohio State with honors, I landed a consulting job. The salary wasn't lavish, but compared to my years of scraping by, it felt like wealth. I rented an apartment with real furniture, not just milk crates. My company offered tuition assistance, and within months I was enrolled in Case Western's MBA program. The cycle repeated. Full-time work, night classes, a body held together by coffee and adrenaline. But compared to those community college years, it felt like flying. Adrian? Still at home. Still smirking in every social media photo, drinks in hand, surrounded by people who looked equally lost. My parents' finances bled into the red, but they kept paying his bills, calling it helping him find himself. I didn't call, didn't write. I had built a wall, brick by brick, with every shift, every exam, every rent check. Then, at my MBA graduation, as Grandma snapped photos and insisted on champagne, she leaned across the table with a look I hadn't seen before. Serious, deliberate. "Celeste," she said, "there's something I need to tell you." Grandma Ruth's tone that night pulled me out of the celebration. The restaurant around us buzzed with clinking glasses and bursts of laughter, but at our table the air went still. A candle flickered between us, shadows rising across her lined face. "I'm updating my will," she said. "You need to know what's in it." I froze, the champagne flute halfway to my lips. "Grandma, don't talk like that. You're healthy. You've got decades ahead." She waved me off, eyes sharp. "This isn't about death, Celeste. It's about justice." My chest tightened. "Justice?" Her hand reached across the table, covering mine. "Your parents chose to sacrifice you for Adrian. They showed the world where their loyalty lies. I can't forget that, and I won't reward it. Everything I have, the house, the investments, the antique business, it's all going to you." Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't about the money, though the numbers she mentioned would dwarf anything I'd ever seen. It was the fact that someone in my family was finally choosing me. "What about Dad?" I whispered. "He's your son." Her gaze hardened like granite. "He made his choice. He'll live with it. I refuse to let him profit from cruelty." I tried to argue, but she cut me off. "Celeste, you've carried yourself with resilience. You've earned my trust. That matters more than blood." She meant every word. In the weeks that followed, I spent more time at the antique shop. The place had always felt like a museum where the past lingered, but now I noticed details I'd overlooked. The rows of ledgers with her handwriting so neat it looked mechanical. The safe in the back room she never opened when I was around. One evening, as she polished a walnut desk, she said, almost casually, "Did you know I once offered to fund a trust for both you and Adrian? Equal shares. Your parents declined. Said they didn't want the money tied up. Not unless Adrian could control distributions." I stared at her, stunned. "They said that?" Her nod was slow, deliberate. That was when I realized they weren't just blind. They were willfully cruel, so I made other arrangements. That night I lay awake, the words circling in my head. Not just favoritism, manipulation. They'd been cutting me out long before Yale. A few months later, Grandma told me she was scheduling a doctor's appointment. "A geriatric psychiatrist," she explained. "Marcus Webb. He'll certify I'm of sound mind. I know your father will contest the will, so I'm closing every loophole." The legal precision startled me. This wasn't just inheritance, it was a battle plan. She was preparing for war. One afternoon, while dusting shelves at the shop, I caught her slipping a thick envelope into the safe. She noticed me watching and smiled faintly. "Just paperwork, for later." I wanted to ask, but something in her eyes told me not to. Meanwhile, Adrian was spiraling further. Through whispers in the family grapevine, I learned he'd racked up gambling debts. Online poker had become sports betting, then trips to casinos with money he didn't have. Dad had taken out another loan. Mom had maxed her credit cards. They were drowning, but still they clung to him. I saw them once at a distance. Mom in a grocery store, scanning coupons, her face etched with weariness. She looked older than her years, but the sight stirred no pity. Choices had consequences, and they were living in the shadow of theirs. Grandma, by contrast, seemed to grow lighter as she settled her affairs. She talked about the shop like it was a living thing. "This place will outlast me if you let it," she said. "But don't be sentimental. If you need to sell, sell. Value is about knowing what to keep, what to let go." I didn't know it then, but those words would haunt me later, standing in a lawyer's office as my parents' faces collapsed. For now, all I knew was that the foundation beneath me was shifting. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the expendable child. I was the heir to a legacy, not because I demanded it, but because I had been chosen. That knowledge filled me with equal parts gratitude and fear. Gratitude that someone saw me, fear of the storm that would come when the others learned. The day of Grandma Ruth's funeral felt unreal, as if the world had tilted and left me on unstable ground. She had passed quietly in her sleep at 82. Even though she had been healthy just months earlier, I suppose she had known, in her sharp way, that her time was close. The service was filled with neighbors, old friends, antique collectors, who whispered stories about her generosity and stubborn spirit. I stood beside her casket, numb, clutching a tissue until it shredded in my hand. My parents arrived late, draped in black, their faces arranged into masks of grief. Adrian trailed behind, sunglasses hiding bloodshot eyes. I noticed how they avoided me, how their glances lingered on the floral arrangements, on the murmured mentions of Ruth's successful granddaughter. It was the will reading that stripped away all pretense. We gathered in a polished conference room at Mr. Peterson's law office. Leather chairs, oak table, a wall of neatly labeled binders. My parents sat across from me, their lawyer beside them. Adrian slouched in the corner. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with unspoken expectations. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses, opened a thick folder, and began. Mrs. Ruth Henderson leaves her primary residence, currently valued at approximately $800,000, to her granddaughter, Celeste Marlowe. Mom's lips parted, Dad's jaw clenched. He continued. Her investment portfolio estimated at $2 million, also to Celeste. Her antique business, including inventory, goodwill, and accounts, likewise to Celeste. I felt heat spread through my chest. The room seemed to tilt. And to my son Robert and his wife Patricia, Mr. Peterson read, I leave the sum of $1 as a reminder of how they valued their own daughter. Mom gasped, a strangled sound. Dad shot to his feet. This is outrageous! She wasn't in her right mind. She was manipulated. Unfazed, Mr. Peterson pulled out another document. Anticipating this claim, Mrs. Henderson underwent evaluation by Dr. Marcus Webb, a licensed geriatric psychiatrist, 1 month before her death. He certified that she was of sound mind and fully capable of making legal decisions. This codicil, witnessed by 3 individuals and notarized, confirms her wishes. Dad's face reddened. This is your doing, Celeste. You poisoned her against us. I kept my voice steady. No, Dad, you did that yourselves. Adrian finally spoke, sneering. So you think you deserve everything? You were always jealous. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Jealous. I earned my future. You threw yours away. Their lawyer tried to argue undue influence, claiming I had isolated Grandma, but Mr. Peterson produced affidavits, neighbors who had visited her weekly, the shop manager who confirmed she was active until the end, even my high school guidance counselor who testified how my parents had refused to fund my SAT prep while spending thousands on Adrian. Each piece of evidence dismantled their case brick by brick. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Mr. Peterson pulled out a photocopy of a letter stamped with an old Yale admissions seal. This surfaced during probate discovery. It was a notice about Celeste's enrollment confirmation. According to postal records, it was signed for at the Marlowe residence by Patricia Henderson. My mother went pale. I remembered that summer, waiting for updates, wondering why Yale hadn't followed up. The silence that had seemed like fate now felt like sabotage. The court didn't need to litigate it, but the implication was enough. My mother had intercepted that letter, and with it, my future. The judge dismissed their challenge. The will stood. In the hallway afterward, Mom's mascara streaked down her cheeks. She grabbed my wrist. How could you do this to us? We're your parents. I pulled free, my voice low, even. You stopped being my parents the night you tried to bury my dreams over pot roast. I walked out, the sound of her sobs echoing behind me. After probate court closed the door on their contest, life shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, I was not just Celeste, the girl scraping through on ramen and secondhand clothes. I was the owner of an estate worth millions, the sole heir to a business I barely understood, and the reluctant custodian of a legacy my parents had tried to erase me from. The first months were overwhelming. The house was too large, haunted by the scent of lavender sachets and the echo of Grandma's slippers against hardwood floors. I couldn't stay there. I sold it, not because I wanted the money, but because the silence inside those walls pressed down like a weight I wasn't ready to carry. I invested most of the proceeds conservatively, setting aside $300,000 to establish a scholarship fund for young women like me, girls brilliant enough for Ivy League dreams, but shackled by families who didn't believe in them. The antique business was a different challenge. I didn't know mahogany from maple or how to price a Victorian brooch, but I knew balance sheets, systems, and growth. The longtime store manager, Evelyn, became my right hand. "Your grandmother trusted me," she said, sliding ledgers across the desk, "and now I'll trust you. Just promise not to lose what she built." I didn't lose it. I scaled it. I modernized the inventory system, launched an online storefront, and poured money into social media ads that reached collectors far beyond Ohio. Within 18 months, the single shop was a small chain, 3 brick-and-mortar locations, and an online store that shipped nationwide. My professional life accelerated in tandem. The consulting job led to a role at a rising tech startup. Within 2 years, I was poached by another company scaling faster than I could imagine. They closed a $60 million Series D round and needed a CFO who knew how to bootstrap and bleed for every dollar. At 28, I was sitting in a glass-walled office downtown, watching our valuation climb toward unicorn status. Meanwhile, my parents' lives were unraveling. Adrian's gambling spiraled into debts he couldn't outrun, credit cards maxed, payday loans stacking like dominoes. Whispers reached me that he owed money to men you didn't ignore without consequence. My parents had mortgaged themselves into oblivion to keep him afloat. The house they'd once been so proud of was underwater. Their retirement funds were drained. Dad, once a regional manager, was reduced to night shifts as a warehouse security guard. Mom scrubbed offices, her back bent from years of lifting what wasn't hers to carry. Then came the call. I didn't recognize the number, but when I answered, my mother's voice cracked through the line. "Celeste, it's your father. We need help. The bank's foreclosing. We need $500,000. Just a loan. You'll get it back in a month, I promise." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, disbelief hardening into something colder. Where would you possibly get $500,000 in a month? "We'll figure it out," she sobbed. "We're family. Family helps each other." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Family? Like when you intercepted my Yale acceptance? Like when you gave me a choice between homelessness and sacrifice? "That was different," she insisted. "We were trying to do what was best for Adrian," I snapped. "Always for Adrian. Well, maybe you should ask your precious son for the money." Her silence told me she already had. I hung up before she could say more. Within days, an email arrived from Dad. Angry, threatening. Legal jargon about rights of the only son and inheritance disputes. I forwarded it to Mr. Peterson, who drafted a response so precise it cut like a scalpel. Their claims had no standing. Any further harassment would meet swift legal consequence. That night, as I sat alone in my condo, a voicemail pinged from an unknown number. A rough male voice muttered Adrian's name, something about markers and interest piling up. My stomach turned cold. I saved the message, installed a security system the next morning, and alerted Mr. Peterson. I refused to let Adrian's recklessness bleed into my hard-won life. Weeks later, I drove past the old family house just once. The lawn was overgrown, foreclosure notices plastered to the door. A stranger's car sat in the driveway. My parents were gone. They moved into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Dayton, clinging to each paycheck like a lifeline. The golden sun they had sacrificed me for had abandoned them, slipping south to Texas to dodge creditors. Meanwhile, I woke each morning to floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight spilling across my desk, quarterly reports reflecting numbers I once only dreamed of. I was building a life no one could foreclose. Yet at night, when the city lights flickered against glass towers, a question lingered. If they called again, begging, would I answer? The scholarship fund became my sanctuary. Every semester, applications poured in, letters from young women who reminded me of myself at 18, girls who had fought through nights of hunger and mornings of doubt, girls who had been told, "You don't need this," or "Let your brother shine." Their essays spilled across my desk like fragments of my own story, but with one crucial difference. They still had a chance. I read each one carefully, sometimes with tears blurring the words. I made sure the board I'd appointed stayed impartial, that the process was transparent. No favoritism, no manipulation, just merit and need. When the first recipients sent thank you notes, I pinned them above my desk. They weren't just gratitude. They were proof that what had been stolen from me was now multiplied for others. Professionally, I was thriving. The antique business kept growing. modernized yet rooted in Grandma's touch. The startup I had joined was preparing for an IPO, my equity stake ballooning into millions on paper. I had a downtown condo, a car that ran without coughing, the ability to travel anywhere I wanted. To the outside world, I had won. But shadows lingered. One evening, as I scrolled through LinkedIn, a notification appeared. Adrian viewed your profile. A message followed hours later. Hey, Cel, it's been too long. We should reconnect. Family's family, right? Let's put the past behind us. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box. His profile was almost empty. No job listed, just seeking opportunities. It was a hollow shell of a man who had once smirked across the dinner table while my dreams were being gutted. My finger hovered, then I closed the window. Silence was my answer. Weeks later, Mr. Peterson called. There's one more envelope from your grandmother. She instructed it be given to you only when I believed you were ready. I met him in his office, the same oak-paneled room where the will had shattered my parents' illusions. He handed me a sealed envelope, Ruth's handwriting looping across the front. At home, I sat on the couch, heart pounding, and opened it. My dearest Celeste, it began, I once offered to create a trust for both you and Adrian. Equal shares, equal opportunity. Your parents refused unless Adrian controlled the distributions. They would have handed him the keys to your future. That day, I understood that they weren't merely blind. They intended to bind you. I chose instead to free you. My throat tightened as I read the rest. She wrote of her pride, of her love, of her certainty that I would carry her legacy beyond the walls of the shop. Value is not in bloodlines, my dear, but in choices. You chose resilience. That is why I chose you. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the safe I'd bought for myself, and sat in silence for a long time. Images flickered. My mother's tight smile when she first read my Yale letter, my father's ultimatum over pot roast, Adrian's smirk in the shadows, and then Ruth's steady eyes, her hands on mine across a candlelit table. They had thought they destroyed me. In truth, they had redirected me. The scholarship fund grew. The antique shops flourished. The IPO loomed closer. My parents remained in that dingy apartment, counting coupons under fluorescent lights. Adrian remained a ghost, orbiting the edges of my life, but never crossing the threshold. Sometimes people asked if I'd ever forgive them. The truth was simpler. I didn't think about them enough to forgive them. Indifference was its own kind of freedom. I had found my family in other places, colleagues who respected me, mentors who guided me, scholarship students who called me their inspiration. Blood had failed me, but legacy, chosen, deliberate, earned, was stronger. As I looked out over the city skyline one night, glass towers glowing, I thought of Grandma's last lesson. Value is knowing what to keep, what to let go. I had kept resilience. I had let go of them. And that was enough.